Our choices can be said to be a reflection of how we see ourselves. Inferiority complex in Nigeria has been around for so long, it feels like a part of our makeup. The desire to procure items of foreign origin over indigenous ones. It is not uncommon for Nigerians to want design work from white foreign firms over their Nigerian counterparts. Let's look at National Theatre in Lagos. Designed about 1974 by a Bulgarian company, Techno Expostroy, for Yakubu Gowon's government for Festac 77, the Festival of Black Arts and Culture. Such a noble and important event would have gone down better with a theatre complex designed by such Nigerian architects as J.S.K. McGregor or Alex Ekweme. These were young architects of the time whose work was global standard and en route to producing an Afrocentric modernist design style. But here was the scandalous aspect. The theatre in Lagos was almost a copy of the Palace of Culture and Sports in Varna, Bulgaria. Here's a photo for you. Yes, you got it wrong. That's not Lagos, it's Varna. The architects played on the mentality of the rather young officer who headed Nigeria and even remarked that the building would recall the army officer's cap. Nice idea for symbolism. Around about 1996, a good friend of mine asked to introduce me to a possible client who is now one of Nigeria's 5 richest persons. He wanted a modernist home. As he consequently said to my friend, he'd rather have a foreign architect work for him, as he could not rely on a Nigerian architect whose works, like mine, could be flukes. His home, of not impressive design, was penned by an Italian architect. At that time, I had built little. In 2003, another of Nigeria's richest young men visited my client and asked who the architect for the building was. My client answered him that it had been designed by a Malaysian architect friend of his. Today, that richest man has had an impressive modernist home designed for him by a South African firm with lots of work now in Lagos. And this is how it goes. Major tall office buildings designed abroad and only supervised by Nigerian firms. That in itself is a business sector, I have to admit. Goodluck Jonathan had an architect as vice president, yet nothing tangible could be said to have happened to boost the confidence of Nigerians in their architects or the architects in themselves. Here's the simple truth. Many can talk about capacity lacking in some of our local design firms, but design as separate from technical detail is possible within small firms. Many projects abroad are run this way. A small office teams up with a larger one to move the design forward to the technical detail level. If we continue on this path, we will not develop our own people and workforce or eventually rise above the mediocrity that persists from decade to decade.
I think that this thing for this penchant for us as Nigerians, or indeed as most Africans who want something that is outside of Africa, is something that comes from a colonial past, which was, in my view, is systematically sort of, evangelized, if I can use this religious expression, that we've come to associate our own design, way of thinking as being somehow inferior. I think more than anything else, our way of thinking to be inferior. It was systematically implanted in us over decades, even centuries. And we are only now beginning to even question. I think the biggest challenge for us, and that's why I think it's the role of the media media owners and media practitioners really need to understand it. When I mean media, not just news, but everybody who has print, television, movies, whatever. The number one thing we need to do is to reorientate our mindset. When I work in the film industry, I often use this quote by William Mays, the first person who started censorship in America. And he said, if we were able to sell American ideology to the world, made this in 1923, the whole world will love America. And so every time, there's no movie today you watch that you will not find at least 5 scenes with an American flag. No, zero.
Okay,
that mentality, I think, goes. So architecture and design is a sub part of it. you know.
Okay. Let me come in at this point, because I've seen it slightly different, because I always ask which came first, the chicken or the egg. And in this case, is it justified that we look down on our own? And sometimes it is. Because if you ask someone why we have Julius Berger here doing our roads, because a lot of times we're not showing accountability. I know, my dad, who was in the railways then, he would say that we shouldn't have taken over as soon as we did, because we weren't trained to handle things, and that was part of the problem, that we took over without being trained. We were cutting corners too much, so we don't have that tradition. And I know I'm sounding like I'm pro-colonialist, but I'm trying to say, if you're not ready, why are you trying to? But if you look at it on the other side of the fence, when it comes to things like Ashebi, our own, even if it's Ashoke or imported, but our music, our Nollywood industry. So if you give us a cause to get behind you, we will get behind you. But from the other perspective, I think if you then promote our own, we are good at follow. If today it becomes trendy to design your house, because our fashion industry is doing well, it's cool to wear it to embassy or whoever is the latest designer. So if you now make it fashionable to have a Chuka Ehono designed house, make no mistake, all the top guys will want a Chuka Ehono, because we like to be in with the crowd. And so I don't think we're against our own if you can give us cause to get behind our own. But if there's no substance behind it, you can't get behind something that is lacking. If we're cutting corners and we're not doing
which one is it now? The chicken?
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that there is a justification for it in most cases. We're not producing.
But what I'm saying is that it's a mentality that instructs and is responsible
for our below par production.
So even if it's Julius Berger or the colonial people who build the railways and build the rail infrastructure, we see it. We've become to see it as something foreign, and they are the only ones who can do rail. So No,
what I'm saying is that we didn't learn enough before we took over the helm. So we're producing we were talking about this earlier, that our apprentices are too in a hurry to jump the queue. They don't stay and walk through the process. So if you're not the guy who fixes my car, he has some knowledge, but he doesn't have enough, but he will claim he has. And each time he does my car, there's always one problem there. Because he's not properly trained. So
I think it's still not enough excuse. As a country, we should have policies, if we're going to inherit, some of those things, we should train people. If we need to have a program where we send engineers to go understudy, how would best utilize our deposits in Ondo, for instance, such that the universities, when they come back, we can, engineer something that would be locally produced. This is long term. We could say over 10 years, we have a program that we now have professionals who would use those resources. What it will do is it will create local content for us. Research and development will be ongoing, and we have local resources. So it's completely under our control. So we just can't sit back and assume that, we'll never get there. If we don't make that move, what happened to all the lovely architectural design we had in the north? You see architectural designs from the north.
Which is actually
you could tell from the region, and these are all tied to the weather, the terrain, and all of those things. We've not developed, these designs over time, and if you don't sell that, nobody will buy it.
I think
we can't blame government 100%.
No, I won't blame government. I think we're lucky we're in a period of Afrocentricism now. That's true. So we have to, as much as possible within this time, push all we can before the window, or what did they say, before the thing closes.
Fashion cycle changes.
Yes, and then get it away from being part of fashion cycle, so it becomes the thing. Then you can close the window, but we're already Afrocentricized or whatever.
I think education is really the major problem here. Because we know what schools or what vocational schools that our people go through, we can't trust that they're going to produce the kind. No, it's true. You can't really trust that they're going to produce that kind of work. And often, when they do produce that level of work, it's almost the same cost as maybe getting what is considered the original. Because it's true.
You have to present so much more.
You have rough edges initially.
No, which I agree. But like this man that Chuka mentioned actually wanted, again, it was more for status symbol purposes, I believe. I think he wanted to say, oh, my house was built by an Italian or whatever.
Symbol,
exactly.
Yeah, that's the inferiority complex.
That's the inferiority complex we're talking about here. But education is really it. If I could trust that the person coming to do my work was well trained, and I'll be willing to pay them what they what they deserve.
Yeah.
But because you know that it's just some guy who's tinkered with your engines or whatever, when he comes and he's charging whatever, you're going to argue that price right down to the bare minimum because you don't actually place any value
you may
on
even pay
his...
double to get a foreign...
Exactly.
Yes.
And then also we know that we cut corners as well. So, most people would rather go to somewhere where it's accountable, where they can actually, than with someone that says, oh, well, we ran out of wood. And
I'll give you an illustration I came across the other day. There's a British guy who is doing publishing here in Nigeria. And he says, to his amazement, a lot of the Nigerian textbooks that are published here, he says up to 90% with imported material, whereas he's set up in Oba here in Lagos, and he does everything 100%.
And nobody's
he publishes
gonna trust
magazines,
him.
all the glossy ones, and he's doing his business 100% because I was surprised that he's able to do that efficiently here in Nigeria.
And so we come to the end of another packed and potent edition. Let's keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. On Facebook, Plus TV Africa, #TheAdvocateNG, or on Twitter and Instagram, @Plus TV Africa, TheAdvocateNG. So, until next week, same time, fresh topics. Let's keep advocating for a better society. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to The Advocate, a program that thrashes out all the topical issues of the day.
When you are in government, you don't see nothing wrong with whatever is happening. The moment
Self-interest.
you are out there, everything is wrong.
You can't even see many women now, and when they're there, they're not even really making a mark, and then they have an NYSC problem and this and that.
One of the reasons why we don't have more women in politics in Nigeria is for as long as political meetings continue to take place in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
Really?
Disastrous for a president
To even say
be
he's unaware.
of the chief
It's a ploy. It could be a strategy.
That strategy was very
Backfired.
terrible strategy because the buck stops at your table.
Whether it's that we don't look after our cities, and quite frankly, Nigeria is becoming a very ugly place.
When you are the only one feeding the people with this news and there is nobody countering them, it becomes, the news.